I'll never forget the day they ripped my world apart. After 15 years at Harper Sons, pouring my soul into that company, I was called into Robert Harper's office. "I'm Sidney, by the way, and I'd been the operations mogger, the guy who kept the gears turning." Robert, with his slick suits and fake smile, didn't even look me in the eye. "Sidney, we're restructuring," he said, sliding a termination letter across his desk. "Effective immediately. No warning, no thank you, just a cold handshake and a security guard to escort me out." My stomach churned, not from shock but from something darker. I'd known this was coming. See, I'd overheard Robert and his right-hand man, Greg Mitchell, in the break room a month earlier. They thought they were alone, plotting to trim the fat and replace me with Greg's nephew, Ethan, fresh out of college with zero experience. They laughed about how I'd be out on my ass before I could blink. The betrayal stung like a knife in my chest. 15 years of late nights, missed family dinners, and fixing their messes, and this was my reward. I carried that secret like a weight, letting it fester as I smiled through meetings, pretending I was clueless. But I wasn't. I was planning. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the termination letter. My hands shook, not from sadness but from rage. My girlfriend, Claire, tried to comfort me, her voice soft as she rubbed my shoulders. "You'll find something better, Sid," she said. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Robert and Greg thought they'd won, but they had no idea what was coming. I wasn't just going to roll over. I'd make them pay, not with fists or lawsuits, but with something sharper, their own secrets, their own lies. I'd spent years learning the company's underbelly, and now, I'd use it to tear them down. The next morning, I started digging. Harper Sons wasn't as clean as it seemed. Robert had been skimming profits for years, funneling money into offshore accounts. Greg, his loyal lapdog, helped cover it up. I'd found hints of it, discrepancies in budgets, vague expense reports, but never acted. Loyalty, I guess, kept me quiet. Not anymore. I spent hours combing through old files I'd backed up on a personal drive, piecing together their scheme. My heart raced with every discovery, a mix of excitement and dread. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about justice, about showing them they couldn't ruin me without consequences. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, and I'd be the one buried. Claire noticed the change in me. "You're obsessing, Sid," she said one night, her hazel eyes full of worry. I brushed it off, saying I was just job hunting, but the lie tasted bitter. I hated keeping secrets from her, but this was mine to carry. The more I uncovered, the deeper my anger grew, not just at Robert and Greg but at myself. How had I been so blind? How had I trusted them? I wasn't sleeping much, my mind spinning with plans. I'd start with Ethan, the kid they'd hired to replace me. He wasn't the mastermind, but he was a piece on their chessboard, and I'd knock him off first. Ethan Carter was barely 22, with a smug grin and a degree he thought made him untouchable. I'd seen him around the office before I was fired, strutting like he owned the place. Greg had introduced him as a bright new talent, and I'd smiled, unaware he was my replacement. Now, I knew better. Ethan was my first target, not because I hated him, but because he was the easiest to break. I wanted Robert and Greg to feel the ground shift beneath them, and Ethan was the crack I'd pry open. I started by watching him. Not in a creepy way, just observant. I'd park near the office, sipping coffee, noting his routine. He'd show up late, leave early, and spend half his day on his phone. Perfect. A guy like that wouldn't notice me poking around. I used an old company laptop I'd forgo 10 to return, still linked to the internal network. Harper Sons had terrible cybersecurity, another thing I'd warned Robert about for years. Logging in with my old credentials, I found Ethan's work emails. The kid was sloppy, forwarding sensitive client data to his personal account, probably to work from home. Or maybe to sell it. Either way, it was a goldmine. I felt a thrill, like I was a detective in some gritty noir film, but there was guilt, too. Was I going too far? Ethan was just a pawn, after all. But then I'd remember Robert's smug face, Greg's laugh, and the way they'd tossed me aside. No, Ethan wasn't innocent. He'd taken my job, my life, without a second thought. I drafted an anonymous email to the company's biggest client, attaching Ethan's leaked data. I didn't send it yet, I needed more leverage, but the power of holding it made my pulse race. I imagined their faces when the client called, furious, demanding answers. It felt good, too good. Claire started asking questions. "You're up all night on that laptop," she said one evening, her voice sharp. I could tell she was hurt, sensing the distance growing between us. I wanted to tell her everything, to unburden myself, but I couldn't. What if she thought I was a monster? Instead, I kissed her forehead and said, "Just tying up loose ends." She didn't buy it, but she let it go. That night, I lay awake, wrestling with my conscience. Revenge was consuming me, but stopping felt like letting them win. I couldn't do that. Not after what they'd done. I decided to meet Ethan, to size him up in person. I bumped into him at a coffee shop near the office, acting surprised. "Hey, you're the new guy, right?" I said, forcing a smile. He looked nervous, like he knew he didn't belong. We chatted, and I played the bitter ex-employee just enough to seem harmless. He let slip that Greg was pushing him to prove himself by landing a big client. Perfect. I'd make sure he failed spectacularly. I left the coffee shop with a plan: sabotage Ethan's pitch by feeding the client dirt on Harper and Sons. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore, it was about shaking the whole company. The client was Margaret Walsh, a no-nonsense woman who ran a chain of retail stores. Harper and Sons relied on her business, and I knew she valued trust above all. If she caught wind of their shady dealings, she'd pull her contract faster than you can say, bankruptcy. I spent days crafting the perfect anonymous tip, using a burner email to send her evidence of Robert's offshore accounts and Ethan's data leaks. I didn't mention names, just dropped enough breadcrumbs to spark her curiosity. My heart pounded as I hit send. This was it, no turning back. Margaret didn't disappoint. Within a week, I heard through an old coworker, Lisa, that she'd stormed into Robert's office, demanding explanations. Ethan's pitch had been a disaster, he'd fumbled when Margaret grilled him about the leaks. I could imagine Robert's face, red with panic, as he tried to smooth things over. I felt a twisted satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. I wanted them to hurt like I did, to feel the ground crumble beneath them. But I had to be careful. Margaret was sharp, and if she traced the tip back to me, I'd be in deep trouble. Claire was pulling away. She'd stopped asking about my late nights, but her silence was worse. One night, she looked at me, her eyes wet. "Sid, what's happening to you?" she asked. I wanted to confess, to tell her how betrayal had turned me into someone I barely recognized. Instead, I snapped, "Nothing's wrong, Claire. Just drop it." The hurt in her face gutted me, but I couldn't stop. Not now. I was too deep in, and the thrill of revenge was all that kept me going. I told myself I'd make it up to her later, once this was over. Lisa, my old coworker, became an unexpected ally. She'd always been loyal to me, and when I reached out, pretending to catch up, she spilled everything. The office was in chaos, Robert was paranoid, Greg was scrambling, and Ethan was on thin ice. Lisa didn't know about my tip, but she sensed something was off. "Be careful, Sid," she said. "Robert's looking for someone to blame." I thanked her, my mind racing. I needed to escalate things, to hit Robert and Greg where it hurt most, their wallets. I started digging deeper into their financials, cross-referencing old reports with public records. The more I found, the sicker I felt. They weren't just greedy, they were reckless, risking the company for their own gain. By now, I had enough dirt to bury Robert and Greg. Their offshore accounts were tied to a shell company, Blue Horizon, which I traced through public filings. They'd been siphoning millions, thinking no one would notice. I felt a mix of awe and disgust at their audacity. But I wasn't ready to expose them yet. I wanted them to squirm, to feel the walls closing in. So, I leaked a small piece of evidence to the company's board, anonymously, of course. Just a hint about Blue Horizon, enough to spark an internal audit. The fallout was immediate. Lisa told me the board was in a frenzy, questioning Robert's leadership. Greg was trying to distance himself, throwing Ethan under the bus to save his own skin. I felt a dark thrill, but it was tinged with unease. I was tearing apart a company I'd helped build, hurting people like Lisa who'd done nothing wrong. Was this who I was now? The thought gnawed at me, but I pushed it down. They'd betrayed me first. They deserved this. Claire and I were barely speaking. She'd moved to the couch, her silence louder than any argument. One night, I tried to explain, to tell her about the betrayal, but the words stuck in my throat. I just need time, I said, hating how weak it sounded. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. I was losing her, and it hurt more than losing my job. But I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close. I told myself I'd fix things with her once Robert and Greg were done. I decided to confront Greg. Not directly, but through a carefully worded email from a fake account, hinting that I knew about Blue Horizon. I wanted to see how he'd react, to watch him sweat. He took the bait, replying in a panic, offering a meeting to clear things up. I didn't respond. Let him stew. Let him wonder who was watching. My heart raced with every step I took deeper into this game. But the deeper I went, the more I felt like I was losing myself. The audit hit Harper and Sons like a storm. The board hired an outside firm, and Robert was suspended pending investigation. Lisa said he was a wreck, snapping at everyone, while Greg was trying to play the loyal soldier. Ethan, predictably, was fired. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt hollow. I'd wanted them to suffer, but seeing it happen was different. The company was crumbling, and with it, the lives of people I'd worked with for years. Lisa called me, her voice shaky. "Sid, people are losing their jobs. Did you have anything to do with this?" I lied, said I didn't, but her silence told me she didn't believe me. "Claire left me a note one morning, I can't do this anymore. I don't know who you are." She was gone by the time I got home. My chest felt like it was caving in. I'd been so focused on revenge, I hadn't seen what it was doing to us. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I wanted to chase her, to beg her to stay, but I was too ashamed. I'd become the kind of person who hurt the ones he loved, all for the sake of settling a score. I sat in our empty apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my choices, and wondered if it was worth it. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. I sent the final piece of evidence to the board, a detailed report linking Robert and Greg to Blue Horizon, complete with bank records. I didn't care about anonymity anymore. I wanted them to know it was me. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, just as I had. The report was my final blow, and I felt a strange calm as I sent it. Whatever happened next, I was done hiding. The news broke a week later. Harper and Sons was under federal investigation. Robert and Greg were arrested for embezzlement, their faces plastered across local papers. The company filed for bankruptcy, unable to recover from the scandal. I watched it unfold from my apartment, a mix of satisfaction and nausea washing over me. I'd won, hadn't I? They were ruined, just as I'd planned. But the victory tasted like ash. Lisa called, furious. "You did this, didn't you, Sid? You destroyed everything." I didn't deny it this time. I just hung up, my hands shaking. I tried reaching out to Claire, leaving voicemails that sounded desperate even to me. "I messed up," I said. I let this consume me. Please, let's talk. She never responded. I couldn't blame her. I'd chosen revenge over her, over everything. I started questioning everything, my motives, my choices, my heart. Had I been fighting for justice, or was I just angry? The line was blurry, and I didn't like the man I saw in the mirror. I ran into Ethan at the grocery store, of all places. He looked defeated, his smug grin gone. "You set me up," he said quietly. I didn't deny it. "You were part of their game," I told him. He shook his head. "I was just trying to get by, man." For the first time, I felt a pang of guilt for him. He was young, stupid, caught in a mess he didn't understand. I walked away, wondering how many others I'd hurt in my quest to take down Robert and Greg. Months passed, and the dust settled. Robert and Greg were facing trial, their reputations in tatters. Harper Sons was gone, a memory. I found a new job, a smaller firm, but it didn't fill the hole inside me. I'd gotten my revenge, but at what cost? Lisa wouldn't speak to me. Claire was gone, her number disconnected. I'd burned every bridge, and for what? To prove a point. To feel powerful for a moment. I started seeing a therapist, a guy named Tom who listened without judgment. Talking about it helped, but it didn't erase the guilt. I'd betrayed Claire's trust, Lisa's friendship, even my own values. Revenge had felt righteous at the time, but now it felt like a poison I'd willingly drunk. I wrote Claire a letter, not expecting a reply, just needing to say I was sorry. I mailed it to her sister's address, hoping it would find her. Maybe she'd read it, maybe not. Either way, I had to try. I saw Ethan again, working at a bookstore. He nodded at me, no anger in his eyes. "You doing okay?" he asked. I was surprised he cared. "Getting there," I said. We talked for a bit, and I apologized for dragging him into my war. He shrugged. "Life goes on, right?" Maybe it did, but I was still figuring out how to move forward. Revenge had cost me everything, my job, my love, my sense of self. I'd won the battle, but I'd lost the war. Looking back, I wonder if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have walked away, let karma deal with Robert and Greg. But I didn't, and now I live with the consequences. I'm trying to rebuild, to be better, but some scars don't fade. Revenge gave me a moment of power, but it took everything else. I'm Sidney, and this is my story, not of triumph, but of what happens when you let betrayal turn you into someone you don't recognize.